Hi there. This is Suzanne Hannafin with Acumen Executive Search, and I am really excited to be here with Jim Grew. Jim is an amazing consultant. For those who don't know him, he's not only an author, he's also an active blogger. He has been a CEO of, Jim, how many organizations?
Well, I've run eight businesses, and five of them I was head of the company, either CEO or president. Eight.
Yeah. And with this today, I am so excited because Jim has not just a lot of experience, but a lot of great insights that I think hopefully we'll all learn from. So, how are you doing today, Jim?
Oh,
Anything
I'm
else?
good.
Yeah, anything else you want to add to the introduction?
Um, I don't think so. The maybe the simplest explanation is I started like most people working in a job and moved in from several jobs to working in mid-sized businesses, typically for the owner, and focusing on whatever the business needed at that time. And I love that. So I've stopped working in companies and have been a consultant for probably 20 years.
Wow.
Um,
I did
and
not realize it was that long. That's
yeah, me
fantastic.
neither.
Yeah.
Me neither. It just time passes. And so the focus has been on what I'm going to call operations, which is not a job title, but it's how businesses perform better. And that can be with reference to revenue or profit or morale or customer service or some mix of those. Uh, and it's usually helping the leader, whoever she or he might be more clear about what things really matter and then help getting the organization to do those things. Sounds like everybody's book about leadership, but that's where the focus is. So, an insight that struck me is that when this business situation involves dad or mom who've been running the business stepping back and letting son or daughter run the business, everybody focuses on the new kid instead of focusing on mom or dad. In fact, the need for change is greater for mom or dad than it is for the new kid because mom or dad has been doing this often since founding. That's what they do, that's who their identity is. And making room for somebody else is simply not something that they are even aware of. So part of what I do is ask medium tough questions of those people to help them sort of move from I'm running this thing to I'm increasingly letting my son or daughter lead, but being there so they don't stumble. So more focus on dad and then on son or daughter. And then if son or daughter wants help, some do, some don't, then helping them because their challenge is different. So I tell you a story. I was working in a construction firm, about a $50 million business, wonderful people. The owner of this company is a woman. It's a family business, and the job was to train up her successor, who's a guy who was very able, had been in the construction industry for 35 years, but had never led a major company. And the shocker was at the point where he was promoted from running a division to being chief operating officer, meaning the whole company is now reporting to him. And I said to him, and knowing what he was going to say, is this any different from your old job? And he did, oh my God, I had no idea. He was, of course, very easy to work with because he was frank about what worked and what didn't. And so we focused with him on delegation and how to help other people be successful rather than him doing it himself. He had less hands-on time. And so he had to set up a structure for his people, which would help them be successful, which is one of the things we did.
And I love that because again, there's not any one solution for a situation or for a client. But let's kind of talk about you, Jim, and how you approach things. Has there been any like formative leadership experience or a mentor that really has helped you kind of grow as a professional and as a person that you can share with us?
Sure. My first um, two jobs were in very large corporations. They both happened to be retailers. And one of the things people don't understand about retailing is it's a very simple business, but the attention to numbers is breathtaking. They knew every week how every single store did and every department did. And this was a particular company in Chicago with 360 stores. They had all the numbers and they looked at them every week and made adjustments as they needed to. Okay, and so the takeaway for me was numbers, number one. And number two is a regular, how are we doing? What do we need to do?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize until much later, gosh, 15 or 20 years, that in fact, I was insisting on that structure every place that I worked in smaller businesses, because my experience is in all of the business that I've consulted with, everyone, maybe, I don't know, 40 or something, the leaders are stretched enormously thin. There's a huge amount of input. It's challenging. And these are companies with anywhere from 30 to 300 employees, so that mid-sized business, which is what's around here. There are so many questions and challenges and things going on that one of the major blocks to success for even the most successful leaders is being willing to say, I'm not working on that right now, set it aside. And so part of what I did with them, every client, is to say, well, where do we want to be in a year? What would that look like? This is not a new idea, but actually doing it. Okay, then what do we need to do this month toward that end, and help the leader steer the people in that to that structure.
And I know, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say that I kind of backed into doing this in a garbage hauling company, which I know nothing about. To me, that's the people who show up early in the morning and take away the garbage. That's all I know. Turns out the garbage drivers I knew were all athletes. They were delightful. They were very competitive. They would know to within 30 seconds when they should hit a particular intersection. They had thought through every single thing about their route, and it's a very dangerous business. And one of the learnings with them was that it is dangerous, and their insurance mod for worker comp coverage was 1.4, 1.3, I believe. That is a premium multiple based on their loss experience. Multiple means more. And good businesses will, they call it an X mod. It will be 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. They were at 1.3, I think. We got them down to 0.9, and it was really simple. We said, we got to do it. Here's why. We want you safe, of course. We started tracking accidents, so many days since an accident kind of thing. And by the way, we had to convince the staff in the office to support this, because they didn't want to report an accident, because they didn't want to get their guys in trouble. And so we worked with them on why this is better. We don't want anybody hurt. And we offered a bonus for everybody in the company for $25 if they want a month with no accidents. Now, $25 is nothing.
Yeah.
And the lesson was, because we measured it and talked about it, and we had a symbolic award, their accidents went away. Like I said, their experience mod went down to 0.9. Huge financial impact, way fewer injuries. Very satisfying, because I like these people, and it's a bad deal when they get hurt. So that experience was about, it's not about the bonus, because somebody early told me, you can't offer a bonus that's big enough to motivate most people. If you offer them a bonus of $25,000, for most people, that doesn't even buy a car, or if it's a lousy car. It's just, and you can't offer $100,000 to 30 people. You can't. There isn't that much cash in a year. So the bonus system has got to be a little bit of money and a lot more of measuring and recognition is another thing that I learned, and it works over and over. I'll stop.
No, that's interesting. And so, hearing this story and knowing you're known as very much a straight shooter. You don't hold a lot back. But what core values do you bring that you hold that most of your clients also need to hold? that there has to be alignment. We always say, between mission and vision when we're recruiting, but it's the same with you and your clients. There has to be this alignment. What core values do you look for and what are important to you?
Well, I've got to be hired by a client. And so that's the basis of that is trust, which is a cliche, but it's true. And that runs both ways, by the way. I've got to want to work with this person uh, because I enjoy them, because I think I can help them. If I can't help them, why are we here? I do not want to have an experience with a client who has paid me money and then got no result. What's he going to say? This is a small town, and that's not a good deal anyway. So trust is first. And I think honesty or truth is second. To be able to say this, here is what I see, here is the evidence. Do you see that? And one of the things that I learned is that when I make a statement, if there's any question about it, I try to get evidence on the table very quickly and to teach people I'm working with. Whenever somebody makes an assertion to you, ask them directly, what is your evidence? Just like that, with those words. Don't beat around the bush, because often people believe things but have no evidence. That's a different conversation. So those are that's sort of at the beginning. I also want to work with people who care about results. The trust fund baby doesn't so much. They have a different menu of outcomes, and that's not somebody that I want to work with. I actually made some notes here about this. Um, a commitment to their people doing better. I think the measure of a leader is not what the leader does, but what the people do. So you look at what the people do, you'll see what kind of a leader they have. Always, always, period, no exceptions, always. It doesn't matter what the industry is. And there has never been an exception to that. Most people do better with some kind of coach, support, help, guidance, leadership, whichever number you or word you choose. And so if the organization or the people don't want to do better, I don't want to be there. What a dreadful, a sort of a drudge. I think kindness probably, I'm trying to figure out how to say that, because there are times when the business needs things which are uncomfortable or unpleasant, but almost always you can present them in a way that's kind. And it is cheap. It takes very little time. A story which I will never forget. I was president of a company making metal parts. We made them for Daimler. We made about 40,000 parts a day. And the tolerance was to 15 thousandths,
Okay.
which is medium difficult, not super difficult. And the second step in the manufacturing process was bending parts that have been cut out of a laser with a machine called a press brake or a brake press, depending on what you call it. This is a machine that bends metal around a die, and there's a specific way the machine has to be set up, and so that it produces good parts. And I was on the production floor and just happened to ask a guy who was running one of the machines, "How are you doing?" And he went off about the fact that the backstop, which is what holds the part in place, was loose, and he was having a heck of a time making good parts. And I asked him what to me was the obvious question: Have you talked to our production manager and named him? No, I didn't want to bother. Geez, would you mind if I did? Oh, that'd be fine. So obviously I said, hey, we got a problem, and they fixed that. Okay, there's a part B to this. I found out that this guy was working a full shift every day. He was, I'm going to guess, early 60s. He was undergoing chemo for cancer. And I'm sure he wanted the money. But he also wanted to be there to do good work. Well, I will never forget. He didn't make a speech. He didn't even tell me. But building that kind of pride in an organization is partly about who's in there, because obviously we didn't teach him pride. He came with it, and then rewarding that or appreciating that. And for him, I think just getting his machine fixed so he could do his work was a huge deal. That's a way of talking about kindness to the person. I didn't have to yell at him. Anyway, it was really
Wow. And
exciting.
those same characteristics, I would assume, well, maybe I shouldn't assume this. I would, those are what are the characteristics when you were hiring? Because you do help with hiring.
Sure.
What type of characteristics or traits do you look for when you've built a team?
Obviously, the first question is what kinds of skills does the person need in this job? We need some kind of a skills fit. If they don't have them, are they willing to learn them? Is it a stretch or can they do it? That kind of thing. Um, Curiosity is probably top of the list. But people who are curious can learn almost anything. The fact is, everybody working in whatever company was not born knowing that stuff. When they were 5, they weren't doing it, so somehow they learned it. So almost anybody in the right setting. Let me look at my list. And people comfortable with themselves. This is trickier. The things that would cause me to reject are people who have no faults and who aren't able to say, I struggled with this. If they can't say that, I don't want to hire them, because that means they're not going to talk about a problem when it occurs. And they're probably more comfortable with themselves anyway. I already mentioned kindness and adequate analytical skill. There are a few jobs which require really super analytical skills, number skills. Coding, for example, does not require super analytical skills. It requires adequate analytical skills and consistency and attention to detail. So those things are
Mhm.
different. And also want to be clear with the person. Do they prefer working with people or with things? Because this is probably a cliche, and this probably violates some rule, but it's most of the people that I've worked with either really like working with people or really like working with things. And if you put a people person working on a thing job and they don't have any people to work with, they'll leave because they don't get fed emotionally. And a clear communicator. Because if you're the leader, one of the problems is to find out what's really going on. You need a few people, especially leaders, who can say it clearly and in English. I had a production manager who I just loved, this guy who would yell and this is a room of operators. He could probably reach 40 people, and then they loved him. But he would say, I want to see every blank blank machine going up and down. If it's not going up and down, I'm going to visit you right now. That was his thing. He would say that over and over again. And now he also came with mechanics and technical people and help. So when the machine stopped going up and down, he could get the operator help. But that was a people thing, that this is what we're about here, make the machine go up and down, which sounds really dumb. This is a very sophisticated guy, by the way. Anyway, those are
Yeah.
some things.
Well, and I'm going to throw you for a loop and ask a question off script because you see so many different industries, so many different size organizations, and you work with so many different people. When you give advice, typically, what is that about? Is it about people, leadership, strategy? What tends to be the one thing that holds a leader back?
Oh, okay. You flipped
I
the
know,
script
I
on me. Yeah,
kind
you
of
did. That's
changed
good.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, the one. Okay, that's a really good one. Okay, I don't know that there's one, but some. One is fuzzy goals. What are we trying to get done here? And it's remarkable how few leaders have really clear goals that last the whole year. Everybody's got goals. This week I got a whatever, and they got their list. That's not what I'm talking about. And a lack of that means their whole organization is guessing. Their people are guessing, what am I supposed to do? What do I avoid? And so forth. And that means they're not performing well. That's a big one. So the second question after what's your goal, which is a different way of saying, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do better? What will it look like in a year? That's all the same question. And those questions are designed to get the leader to stop solving problems for just a minute and say, where are we trying to go here? And I'm not looking for a 5-year plan. I don't believe in that. Nobody's that smart. I think that's a joke. There are planners who love to do it. They can go do all that they want, but a year is a long time. But if I can get people to say, what do we want to accomplish? And then often I'll ask, what would it be worth to you if that were accomplished, in 2 ways? One is earnings and money. and the other one is feelings about the business satisfaction, because there is a personal feelings pride component for every leadership job, whether people talk about it or not. They're just my experience. There is. If they're now saying, this is where we want to go, then I can ask what's in the way. That's the end of the question. And that models those questions. Where are we trying to go? How are we doing? What's in the way? What I call a how are we doing meeting, which I will help them set up. Usually, it depends on the level of the organization, either daily or weekly. And most people that I work with don't want to meet every week with their key people. I don't have time. We always talk in the hall. It'll be fine. They're wrong. And a client told me yesterday, we've been working together for 2 years, and she was one of the people who, she's very smart. Wow, practical. One of the people who said, I don't know whether this meeting will work. And you know, all the reasons why it won't. She said, those one-on-ones have been the most impactful, effective thing we have ever done, period. It's incredible. And that's about what she said, which made me feel great, of course. And the structure for the meeting is, it's always this day at this hour for this much time, never more than 30 minutes. The agenda is always the same, which is, how are we doing against the goal? Where are we falling short? What's in the way? What can we do? That's the over and over and over and over. And what she realized, and what I've realized, is that if you have the same agenda for a meeting that matters, people will know the agenda is coming and they'll prepare for the meeting. So by the time they get to the meeting, the good ones, they pretty much have their act together, or they say, I don't have a clue about how to do this. Oh, good. That's helpful one way or the other. And I'm back to something that I said earlier, which is the importance of a structure, so that there's an organized way everybody is approaching this thing we're trying to do, because there are thousands of things that aren't working right. Always. Every single person has got problems in the business, out of the business, and you can't fix most of them. But if you have a structure that is consistent, so people know this is where we're trying to go, and here's my part, and here's what I can't do, and they know they're going to get help, they will commit. And some of the problems which seem big aren't so big. You're able to say, well, you know, we don't have to do that right now. Let's put that on the side and do this instead, which is miraculous. Anyway,
No, I think that's brilliant, and a lot of good value that, again, doesn't matter the industry or the size
right.
of the company. That's good advice. I mean, I'm taking notes. Are you kidding me?
Yes. And when there is a cliche that says all businesses are the same. They aren't. That's a dumb thing to say. They're different.
Yeah.
I think the trick is to figure out what is critical in this particular business. Most things are not. There are a few idiosyncrasies in this business, and we have to execute those right, or it doesn't matter how we do the rest. And so part of the job early is to figure out what those are and just ask what really matters. And it's not hard to kind of wade through them. And by asking questions like, well, somebody will say, well, we've got to always ship on time. Really? So what happens if something is late by a day? Does that really matter? In some businesses, it doesn't. In other businesses, it's catastrophic.
Yeah.
So anyway, knowing is yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you another question, which kind of circles back to you, Jim. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self about business and leadership?
Oh, that's a great question. I wish somebody had told me this stuff. One is numbers really matter. And so figure out which numbers matter early and do what you can to deliver the numbers. That's not every, but if you don't have numbers, you don't have cash and you're not there. It's sort of very straightforward. Allow yourself to fail in public is number two. I convinced myself that I had to be successful, which meant never letting anybody see me sweat, which is a really dumb idea. And letting, just saying, I don't know how to do that. This is really critical. I am terrified because I don't know what to do and we're headed for a cliff. It's okay to say that. And interestingly enough, guys like the brake press operator would step up and offer help if they knew you wanted it. And the way you ask for help is say, I don't know what to do. This is really what you got to mean it. This is really important. What can we do? People have all kinds of ideas, and none of those things were in my head. I was bent on getting promoted and being successful, whatever that meant. which is too bad. And I had a mentor. I was terrified of him, so I didn't ever meet with him. He was the president of how big was the company? Geez, $2.5 billion business. And he's a brilliant guy, and he cared about me. And I know that because when our first child was born, he and his wife sent us a onesie for her. But I was so scared that he would discover I wasn't perfect at everything. I wouldn't go asking for help. It's just dumb. It's just easier to ask people for help.
Well, and I'm going to put it in one word. You're talking about humility.
Yes.
And then I thought it was really interesting, fail in public. Why public?
Oh, because first of all, humility I think, is not defined very clearly. Humility doesn't mean, oh shucks, I can't do anything. That's baloney. It's fair to say, I'm good at this. Let's get going on this. And it's also fair to say, here, I don't know what to do. So it's a mix of competence and humility that works. And you ask a question I missed now. What was the?
Oh, you said fail in
public. Fail in public. Yes.
Yeah.
So in any kind of a company, there will be mistakes. If you're the leader, your nightmare is the company makes a massive mistake. Somebody in the company, not you, makes a massive mistake. It's very expensive, and they try to hide it. It's a nightmare. Trying to unearth it is awful. It really disrupts morale. People are now frightened. I worked in another business where we weren't making any money, and the owners of the business correctly brought in forensic accountants. That's code for people looking for theft. Well, nobody explained. I was running this business. I couldn't figure out how to make it go. That's a whole nother thing. But anyway, when you bring in forensic accountants, you're announcing to the people, the workers, the people doing the work, we don't trust you. It is awful. It is catastrophic. You can't do that. And they didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what else to do. And the answer was, the guy who sold the business to the investors hid the way he made money, which was in an adjacent business that he didn't sell. And so the business that he sold was impossible to make money at. The guy was a crook. But anyway, that's why my hair is white. I didn't know either. Anyway, but so fail in public allows you to allow other people to fail, because you said, I don't know how to do this, which allows people to then get help. And as a leader, you can say, that's no biggie, let's move on, or wow, let's get some people to help you here so we can clean that up quickly, because obviously you're really struggling. Either way, it's a win. But if you project that the rule here is nobody ever makes a mistake, you're in trouble. That's not the real world.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this podcast is called Hiring for Good. And what does hiring for good mean to you?
I like that question. I do. The more I thought about it, the more I wrote down. Obviously, hiring for good means good for the company, good for the employees of the company. You bring a person into the organization who will be someone the people there want to work with, is what I'm trying to say. Good for the community, good for the business in that it is successful in terms of meeting its objectives, which are going to be revenue, profit, morale, customer service, a place to learn and grow, those kinds of things. For good means it'll last. That word also means forever. And for good, I inferred, means good performance, doing the job well. And there's also sort of an overarching thing which says to me, we want to bring in somebody who can flourish, or where the odds are good, they will flourish. Hiring is always difficult. Nobody's 100%. We make mistakes. But if the goal is to bring in somebody who will flourish personally and can help the company flourish, that's for good, then there's a whole array of, it's like a Christmas tree, of other benefits that will happen, because this is a person who brings hope, pride, success to everybody else in the company. That's what I'm thinking about. Excuse me, I'm a fan of John Wooden, who was a basketball coach at UCLA. He was a GOAT, probably the greatest basketball coach of all time. His record is legendary. He was a very tough guy, and his players loved him because he took care of them without any question. He was a very simple, very straight shooter. Bill Walton showed up for practice. Bill Walton played for him at UCLA, and then Trailblazer, NBA announcer, tall guy. Walton been gone for 2 weeks. He had a beard. And Wooden said, Bill, have you forgotten something? Uh, and uh, and Walton said, oh, you mean my beard, coach? He said, yeah. And Walton said, well, I believe that I should be able to have a beard if I want. It's my right. And Wooden said something like, it absolutely is your right. The team's going to miss you.
All for a beard.
Right. And Walton went in and shaved off his beard, which is the punchline of the story, because Walton cared so much about Wooden, not about whatever it was about his rights. And he was not a conformist at all. I mean, very much a nonconformist guy. But he had deep respect and trust for Wooden. And Wooden, to me, is a spectacular leader. He never compromised, do the work, get the results, and was there for his people. They loved
Yeah.
him.
And again, that's a translation to all leaders, isn't it?
Yes, yes,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yes.
So yeah, I think it's interesting, especially with the breadth of experience that you come from. There, you said it at the very beginning, it doesn't matter if you know the industry or the size of an organization or Gen 1, Gen 2 founders. You again, we've seen you walk into organizations and help them by really, I don't want to say stating the obvious, but you have a way of asking questions that bring it down to the basics.
Yes, and this is not humble. I can't, I just see stuff. And I've learned after a while, I've been in many, many meetings especially when I was younger. And there would be people would be talking about stuff, and I would thinking, we're talking about in my head. I'm not saying this out loud. I'm scared to say this out loud. This doesn't make any sense to me. Why are we doing this? And so later on, I have been able to say, why are we doing this? What's going on here? That kind of an example. This happens to be the construction company. They had a management team which was with all the wrong people. In that meeting, this is the people who are supposed to run the business, is the current owner, her husband, a fellow who used to be a senior executive in the company, but was no longer there, but was still there, the guy I was coaching, and two department heads out of five. I think there was one other person that shouldn't be there. And I said to the owner, that's the wrong group. And I just said that. Okay, really? And I said, these people should leave.
Yeah.
You get to go, but he runs the meeting. You sit in the back and be quiet and talk about it later. To me, this is obvious. Hello, if he's going to run the company, what are you people doing here? And they were getting nothing done, obviously, because there's a bunch of opinions and everybody's waiting for the old guys to say whatever they were going to say. I don't know who was right. Their results got better. So that would be, one thing to think about. There's one other story that was kind of, I didn't expect. I worked at a loudspeaker company here, and they made very high end, still do, loudspeakers, which were sold to home theater installers. And that's all their customers did. And the installers bought from 5 different industries in order to put together a home theater for you in your home, which would cost anywhere from $75,000 to $500,000, depending on what you had. And I can't do all the industries, but there always was a loudspeaker maker, an amplifier or processor maker, somebody who did wiring, and somebody who did controls, and one other one I forget. Doesn't matter. So if you think about the way this custom installer lives, he goes and meets you at your home and talk with you about what are your dreams for a home theater, and you make a plan. And at some point, he has to show up and say it's going to cost this much and it's going to take this long. And he's guessing when he says this long. if you think about it a minute, if he says to you, so in 6 weeks, you'll have the home theater on Wednesday, you're thinking Saturday night, I'm going to have a party, invite friends over to hear this system, right? And so it's important that he actually gets it done on Wednesday. And if he finds out that his loudspeakers are going to be 4 weeks late and he can't meet that deadline, he wants to tell you as soon as possible because he doesn't want to lose the job. This is
Right.
very, very simple. So anyway, I'm at this company and I'm chief operating officer and trying to understand, okay, what matters and what are we doing? And the company was shipping late. I mean, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks late, which has terrible impacts on customers and cash and employees, among other things. I mean, it was not good. So I thought, so we'll get the department heads together, which is sales, production, engineering, supply chain. Yeah, those, right. And so I just said, could we all get together tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, not knowing what we're going to do? And so I thought, okay, the guy who knows, and these at that stage, these were all guys, the guy who knows about what's in the way of getting this stuff shipped is a production manager. Always, always, always. Because production managers believe their job is to get it out the door at the minimum labor and make the quality okay. That's sort of their hierarchy. Anyway, so I said to the production manager, what are you missing? I mean, is that why we're late? He said, oh, yeah. And he rattled off the list of whatever the parts were. It's half a dozen, not a lot. And so I asked the supply chain guy, do you know when we'll get those in? He said, no. And I'm thinking to myself, seriously, you got to be kidding me. This is not, these are the same speakers. They have the same list of parts. This is not news. So I asked the sales guy, have you told our clients about when they're actually going to get their speakers? He said, oh, God, no, I wouldn't do that. They would be furious. So I'm thinking, wow. Okay. So I said, let's get together tomorrow morning. And sales guy, could you call the customers? We talked some more about some specifics and when we would get some parts and we would therefore ship this order on that date kind of thing. It was a 30-minute meeting, it wasn't long. And I asked the sales guy, would you mind calling a couple of these customers and tell them the real date? And he said, nobody in the industry does that. I know. Why don't you just try it and tell us tomorrow what happened? And he's rolling his eyes, right? Because I'm the new kid. I don't know, anyway. So we get back together the next day and a lot of other good things happened. But I asked the sales guy and he said, you wouldn't believe it. Voice raised, loud. Really? What happened? They were ecstatic. They were so grateful that I told them really when they were going to get their parts, even though it was 5 weeks later. That I couldn't believe it. Really good. Well, so are you comfortable doing that on our? Yeah. Wow. That resulted in a 47% increase year over year in sales. That because those people met. They didn't need me. They met every day. What do we need? What are we short on? What do we need to do? Tell the customers. And what had happened, and this was out of sight, is of course the salespeople quit trying because they had no ship date they could count on. They'd try to make a sale and then the customer would call them and say, where's the part? And they'd be angry and it was terrible. So their morale just went like that. Yeah. And so once they saw that we would ship on the date we said, even if it was late, they started selling again. That's really all that I did. And I didn't know any better. It just seemed to me it's just obvious. We'll figure it out and talk together. Anyway, just never forget it.
Yeah, no, again, what a valuable lesson that honesty, which was one of your key traits and key values you talked about earlier. That's the perfect example of that. Yes, Jim, I tell you, I think our time is up and I just want to say thank you so much. And, there is so much to learn from you. And I encourage everybody to reach out, whether to just have a conversation with you, because every time we do, I learn something new.
Oh, well, thank you. You're very kind. And likewise, the same, by the way. Well, thank you. This was fun.
Yeah. So again, Jim Grew, all of his contact information will be following and we'll go from there. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thanks. And have a good day and a good weekend.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.